We can go ahead and get started. Welcome this evening. So glad to see you. My name is, and I'm just going to say this because my parents are on the call. My name is Dr. John Bartlow, but I usually would introduce myself as John Bartlow. But if I don't use that doctor once in a while in public, my parents, particularly my mother, gets on me for that. So, Shawn, I know you've had the same thing happen with your father. So excited to be with you all tonight. I wish we were in person, but we are finding through these virtual gatherings, we are able to connect with people that we haven't connected with before. And that's very, very exciting. It's during these difficult times, it's one of the silver linings. And we're also able to tackle topics that we typically wouldn't be able to tackle. Kind of like we're doing tonight. And this is a topic that I'm very excited about. It's PSU and the community of Pittsburgh and how they have worked together over the years, particularly in more recent years, to make some really, really exciting things happen in our community. And I've heard these stories for years and years about, how wonderful Pittsburgh was when my parents were growing up here, and I experienced it myself in the 1990s during college, and I've had the pleasure of living here in Pittsburgh the last 16 or 17 years since grad school, and it's a wonderful place, and it's just getting better and better. It's so exciting. So we've got two individuals who have been at the forefront of the progress that we have seen in this community, who are going to be presenting with us this evening. Some very brief introductions. Dr. Shawn Naccarato is our Chief Strategic Officer for the university. He wears many hats, and he's involved with many different things, especially with the university's ties to the community of Pittsburgh, to the state of Kansas, and also all the way to Washington, D.C. And so Shawn has really been at the forefront of many of these projects. He has his hands in many different things. And Shawn has really been a driving force behind the Block 22 project in downtown Pittsburgh, which you will hear about tonight. And he's many other things, and I don't have enough time to go into all of them, other than the fact that he's a dear friend and someone that we're very lucky to have in this community. And I did call him doctor because we finished our program together a year and a half ago, and I know his family will want to hear that too. And then on the call as well, someone who won the Spirit of Pittsburgh Award a few years ago. And Joe Dellasega is someone who I had the pleasure of meeting through Rotary probably about 8 or 9 years ago. And when you talk about people who live and breathe what Pittsburgh is about and are the movers and the shakers behind everything that we do in this community, Joe Dellasega is certainly that type of person, and just a wonderful, wonderful human being. Joe was a 1983 accounting graduate of Pittsburgh State University, a long family history with the university. His father was a professor here. You might know U.S. Awards, formerly known as, I didn't know this, Dell Letters, is that right? And so yep. Joe and his family have been involved with U.S. Awards for years. Joe has been involved with them since 1987. And the past 3 years or so, Joe has chaired the Imagine 2030 committee, which is re-envisioning what Pittsburgh, Kansas is going to look like in 10 years. And just like Shawn, I could go on and on about all the things that Joe has been involved in as well. We've got two really great individuals on this call, and I'm excited that they were able to carve out some time tonight to talk to us about the amazing things going on in Pittsburgh. So, gentlemen, thank you, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Shawn. Really appreciate it. You did forget one of the most important distinctions. It's a connection between that, and that's that your son is my godson. But other than that, you did check the rest of them. I'll tell you, this is I've had the opportunity now and the blessing to be able to go around the country a little bit to talk about Pittsburgh. But I will say, at the same time, there's nowhere I'd rather be than in front of you guys. I would rather it be in the same place. But the notion of speaking to people who have had some level of shared history and also love this place, even if they are no longer in this place, is probably the best thing I could hope for. And to be able to do it alongside not just my brother John here, but also Joe Dellasega, who's really been a mentor of mine on a personal level and a family level. from a leadership standpoint. And I've been really blessed to be able to work with Joe the last decade or so, actually starting with Rotary. Actually, that's where the connection started. And since then, we've kind of been arm in arm on a lot of things. And so this was actually a natural fit for us to talk about this. And in fact, if we can keep under 3 hours, it'll probably make you all happy.
3 hours. I don't have enough time.
So to get started, there's a lot of things that this is a group that probably doesn't need as much introduction to the basic history of Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh State University as some of the groups that we might address. What I do want to highlight is that in some ways, this notion of everything comes back around. In some ways, the things that Joe and I have worked on, I believe, in the last 10 years really come down to some foundational and fundamental notions of building community. You can talk about it in terms of economic development and prosperity. You can talk about it in terms of quality of life. But at the end of the day, really what we're trying to do is to help to ensure a thriving community. And that's something that was from the very start of Pittsburgh, going back to 1876, when these folks tried to start a new community on, some dusty Kansas prairie. But also the heritage that we both tap into, which is that gritty immigrant heritage that is very communal in nature, and it was hard scrabble and also had to be communal at the time when both of our my great grandfather, Joe, was that your great grandfather or grandfather?
Exactly. Yep. Great.
Coming over from Italy, and you think about how bad things must have been in southern Italy for my great grandfather at least, to think I need to go make my dream would be made digging ditches in Boston, digging sewers in Boston, and then eventually digging underground in Southeast Kansas. And so in some ways, I feel like what Joe and I have been trying to do is tap into something that was already before, and we're just trying to bring it into now and be relevant with now.
Yeah. And, Shawn, it's, thinking about that past, it's funny, both our names in with a vowel, and so it's the Italian roots that are amazing. But this being such a melting pot, I just think it's an amazing thought that people across the country are talking diversity and people working together. I mean, there's never been that modeled than what it's been in Pittsburgh, Kansas for the last 100 years. I mean, it's as many of you know that spent time here, any time at all, you got a feel for that. So I'm really excited to be here tonight and maybe share a little bit about just what this community is doing. One thing we find when we talk to alumni and people that have been through here is whether you grew up here, someone like Dave that went to school here and went to college here. A lot of people just came here just for college. But the exciting thing that we found versus maybe what other communities that are drying up are experiencing is that because of having a university and because of the time that people had, those 4 years that they were here, there is a love in their heart for this community that is something you can't recreate. It's just a blessing that we have that. And so there's so many things we're going to share with that are working for us. But one is that rich foundation of a place that had a heart and had a culture, and it's something that people enjoyed, whether you were here for 4 years or whether you were here for 22 years of your life.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, and what our hope is that by the end of this discussion, and we really are, this is almost like a fireside chat standpoint. Joe actually said to me before, I'm at my office down at Block 22 with this flag. He said, "Shawn, you look like you're getting ready to announce you're running for president." I said, "I know it seems really close to the election to make an announcement for a run for any office, but I thought this would be a good venue." But no, the sense that what we hope is that by the end of this, that you have a feeling that there's momentum in Pittsburgh, that Pittsburgh is a place that you would consider coming back to visit, at least to live, possibly to invest, and to encourage others to do the same. And I think, and Joe, in a little bit, we'll talk, or a little bit later, we'll talk about some of his personal history with just that, and how the transition has occurred, that we want to move from a place wherein our largest export is our sons and daughters, and that has been the case for far too long. And I think Joe and I both are very committed to this notion of helping to turn that, and we think that we are turning that. Now, we're obviously in the midst of a significant challenge that no one was anticipating. That what we hope is that the progress that has been made over the last decade can retain some of that or the core of that through to the other side of whatever the other side looks like. But I also think, and we'll talk as we talk about the future, there are also some opportunities that are presented for Pittsburgh through this challenge. And so, Joe's going to talk a little bit about Imagine Pittsburgh 2030 here in a moment, but I want to back up a little bit and touch back on this notion of the roots and the connection that had existed between the university and the city from 1903. There was many of you know the history and the story of the argument that was between Parsons and Pittsburgh of who was going to get the state mental hospital and who was going to get the college, which at the time was the manual training normal associated with Emporia State. And I think we got the better deal on that at the end of the day. I think most people would agree to that. But many people don't know. Here I'm sitting now at the corner of 4th and Broadway in what was originally the old Opera House here in Pittsburgh. And just down the street from us was the original home of Pittsburgh State University. Literally less than 2 blocks away was where the city let the new fledgling college, have a building to use in downtown before Russ Hall was built. And then if you were to fast forward to the fire at Russ Hall and the fact that this community coming together within 24 hours to raise enough money for our first principal at the time, CEO at the now president, but Russell S. Russ to be able to go to the legislature in Kansas and to say we have backing in our community that is sufficient to help offset what the state should invest. You think about those moments. It's one thing to then put this current moment in perspective. This community and this university have been through, first of all, this could have been a mental hospital instead of a university. Number two, this could have, when it was burnt down, could have never been rebuilt. Number three, we may not have survived World War I, the influenza of 1918, 1919, World War II, Korea. You go down the list of all these things, even up until the Great Recession 2008. I have no doubt that with the people that we have in place at this university and this community right now, we will also weather the COVID pandemic and we will make it to their side stronger. And so I think it's really important for us to think about this place is a place that came almost out of nothing. It is much more than that now. We have way many more resources now than they did when this thing started. So I'm confident that we're going to make it. And one of the things that's helped to do that as we've grown is the fact of efforts such as what Joe has led with Imagine Pittsburgh 2030. And I'll let him speak to that now.
Yeah. As Shawn was talking, these years of grittiness and of thriving, we started and thriving. The university has always been on a steady growth. Gordon Elliott, I don't know many of you know Gordon, but he tells the story of when he moved to Pittsburgh in I think the early 70s maybe, and there was the 70s and the 80s, and the community was not thriving or growing, especially as coal and some of our larger manufacturers were affected by that. But the one thing that has been constant is the leadership that we've had that have kept us through the good times and the bad. So I just think it'd be folly if we didn't kind of use that as our foundation or stepping off point. That building on the shoulders of giants, I think, really applies in this situation. And the other thing, and the upfront that I'd want to say early on is just how Shawn and I have been fortunate to be in the middle of this with so many other leaders. This has truly been a team sport, and I think it was a team sport in the past, and I think that's what's playing itself here. I was in a leadership Pittsburgh, back in the 80s, and I don't know how many of you remember Gene DeGrusom. Just an amazing impact that in legacy he left on the university, and he addressed our group. And one of the things that he talked about, he gave us the history and how vibrant Southeast Kansas was and a leader in the state. And one of the things that he tied into is that when we started to not prosper or to drop off, we did not have the involvement at the state level that we didn't have somebody out there that were literally was promoting Pittsburgh and keeping us on the forefront. And he also said that there were times of that where we didn't think big or big enough. And that really stuck with me, especially as we led up about 8 to 10 years ago. There were a lot of things in Pittsburgh that people individually in different camps or silos were wanting to do, different initiatives. And under the leadership of Blake Benson at our Chamber of Commerce, they were on a retreat, and they started talking about what would it look like if we put together a visioning group, later named Imagine Pittsburgh 2030, and we dared to dream, and then we dared to lay down the plans that would go with those dreams and support those dreams. And so that's exactly what happened. And I give so much credit to the wisdom that the people at that meeting had that day to get that process started, because what it did, there were a lot of people in this community that were watching things and thinking, you know, I don't know where this community's going. It sure has been good to me. It's a good place. But you know, there wasn't a unified effort to grow. And so that started when a group was pulled together and went, and I can tell you about the process. It really is not relevant. It was a very intelligent, smart, all-inclusive process that laid down some vision. And at that time, I was excited by it. And actually, it went for 5 years, and I was participant, and then asked to kind of, after 5 years, we shook up the leadership and brought some new people in, and I was asked to be in on that wave, which has just been a great thing. But in that process of IP 2030, two things I'd like to share and kick it back, Shawn, to you to talk about the present. But one was, personally, I've been here my whole life, been come and gone twice, but I've been here. I had 4 children. None of them were in Pittsburgh, and Janice and I's belief that it's the university. It's great if you want to get your education here, if you go somewhere else, but maybe to see part of the world and just understand and appreciate where you're from and what's going on out there. And I could say I was not actively recruiting or encouraging my kids to come home. I felt like for me, I made the decision this was home. This is where Janice and I are going to play out our days. But I did not feel compelled that the future would be as bright as I'd hoped for my kids. And then I got involved with Imagine Pittsburgh 2030, and I was with a friend of mine from the Osho, and he started asking me about several people that were in our orbit, young people, and I'd say, well, he's moved to here, he moved here, and people had moved away. And he said, does that not upset you? Have you had no effort to even keep people engaged in the community? Not necessarily always just to live here, but just engaged here. And so it got, then along came IP 2030, and as I started to work and I started to, realize all the opportunities that were out there, and all the momentum we started to gain, I actually became very much an advocate to talking about my own kids as this is a great place to raise a family. This is a place where you can have an impact. This is a place where you can do business or get anywhere out of. And so it's been a transformation that I went through. And fortunately, the course, 3 of my children have moved home. 2 of them went to work for Coke and now are in a business with us, and my daughter is a teacher, and then my 4th child's in Denver and is enjoying that. So that was just how a change of attitude can affect somebody, and it's been a really great progression. The other thing that's interesting is Matt Burton, another Pitt State alum who's done very, very well, lives in Springfield and was part of the Block 22, his company with making Block 22 happen. But he was in a meeting with a few of us, and we were talking about Pittsburgh, and he said, do you not feel like maybe this is your time or our time for us to really go for it? And in fact, dream even bigger and put things together. And I can remember the room that day, there was a feeling of euphoria, and it's like, we can do this. And so we have a foundation, we had a plan and put the plan in. And now what we'd like to do is to maybe share a little bit of what type those things happened and then what the future would look like.
Yeah. And Joe, it's interesting because just as he was feeling this sort of transition toward maybe it'd be great if his kids did come home as opposed to needing to be gone, is when I was coming home. And so it was an interesting intersection for he and I at that time, which would have been around well, I'd been home for a little while, but I was just moving into a more senior role at the university and having some influence over direction in that regard, because we probably started to cross paths around 2010 is what I recall. So it's been almost 10 years, which would have been about the same time that Joe was involved in Imagine Pittsburgh 2030 and starting to get involved in those things. And then he and I were in Rotary together. And I think that one of the things that I've really noticed is number one, as Joe was alluding to, the importance of leadership and the importance of leaders that are willing to stick around and aren't, that they have reasons to stick around as opposed to go somewhere else to make more money or to do the number of things. That when those folks are seeing that their work is actually benefiting and it's got purpose, they tend to stick around more. And so I think what both of us have noticed is those leadership tables have started to get larger, that the number of folks around them have gotten bigger, and the number that are sticking around longer is increasing. And so that's been a significant piece. The other thing before we transition into, and John, this will give you a little bit of time to figure out how to get the, let's start with the capital investment chart, but is that I want to talk about elections for a minute, okay? And this seems like a third rail I'm supposed to avoid, but I think it's one that's very important. And that is not the national election, not the state election, but it's local elections. And I am a huge fan of, and have long been a believer in the notion of the government closest to the people should be the one that's the most empowered, and that we can make our biggest difference locally. And so when people ask me about the story of Pittsburgh over the last decade and how we've managed to accomplish some of the things we're going to talk about here, I say it was 3 votes in 2011. 3 votes. Up until 2011, we had gone through a period of a pretty significant dry spell with regard to the relations between the city and the university, between the business community and the university or the city. There wasn't, the 3 legs of that stool were not, you had to put coasters under at least one of them at any given time, if not 2. And in 2011, there was not a majority on the commission, city commission, that was willing to go out on a limb and to open up for a national search to find a professional city manager. And we had at the time, and I'm not speaking ill of specific folks, but I will say there was an acrimonious relationship at the time between probably a majority of the commission, specifically the mayor and the president of the university. And so the time, again, shout out to Blake Benson and the chamber for the work that they've done. They had launched an organization called Pittsburgh Area Young Professionals. And I had the pleasure of being involved and being president of the organization. And one of the things that we had made a priority was to get that voting block, that 25 to 40-year-old voting block, to get that block out to actually vote and to be engaged and to care about this election here locally more than they would care about any other one. And that year turned out, and Michael Gray, who was a member of that organization, beat the sitting mayor of the time by 3 votes. And so when people say elections don't matter, et cetera, I'll say, we could have arguments about what, if it matters that much, how you're voting on the federal level in Kansas. But I will tell you this much: how you vote locally and whether you vote locally and whether you're engaged locally is the difference between a community like Pittsburgh being in a place where we're at thriving and thinking about how do we grow even further, and a community like the one that I grew up in, just over the border, whether that's Minden Mines, Missouri, or Liberal, Missouri, where I went to school. My K through 12 school is 40% lower student population than it was when I graduated in 1997. So the difference between drying up and blowing away and saving what is great about small and micropolitan America is whether or not you're engaged and whether or not you have the right leaders and the right people at the table. And so I want to start with, there's some data that honestly, we did not get everything collected and we wouldn't be able to go through anyway. But we'll tell you that in all the key metrics from an economic development standpoint, and I'll say, like, I've been fortunate to be involved in a really innovative team here, wherein we have a contract with the city of Pittsburgh actually to work with the Chamber of Commerce and the city of Pittsburgh to co-lead economic development along the city of Pittsburgh. And I noticed earlier Quentin Holmes is on. He's our housing director for the city of Pittsburgh, and we'll touch on some of the incredible work he's been doing here a little later. But all of the most significant numbers, whether that's unemployment, median wages, sales tax revenues, job growth, we're all up. They're all up. we're outpacing the region, we're outpacing the state in many cases, and we're outpacing the country in comparable size cities in most of those indicators. Sales tax, for instance. So obviously, we were all very concerned in March when the pandemic is just getting fired up, and then there's a shutdown. Oh, the sales tax is going to dry up. We actually, as of last month, are still almost 3% above last year's sales tax collections, year over year. That is outpacing by a factor of, I can't remember, 5, the average for Kansas. Our retail pull factor, which is an example of how many people are being pulled from other places, is second only to Garden City, Kansas, in the whole state of Kansas. It is incredible momentum. And so when we go back to that chart there for a second, the first one you had there, John, I want to talk about that. I want to hover on that for a moment. So this one is, well, this is a tourism chart. We can just kind of, okay, now we're going to go back to, let's go to capital investment. Okay, so this capital investment, this is something that we have worked with Darren Hall, our city manager, who that was the result actually eventually of what I was mentioning earlier about the 3 votes, is that Darren Hall, who had been to Pittsburgh because of a program called Leadership Kansas, which is a program that Joe and I are both graduates of, had known of Pittsburgh. He had spent a long time in Kansas City, Missouri, and then was out in Ulysses in Western Kansas. He keeps this up. This is something, this chart shows capital investment, and the top of it's cut off, but over the last 8 years, 7-8 years, it's $500 million. There's been $500 million of capital investment in Pittsburgh, Kansas in less than 10 years. And you can see there the different areas wherein that's been. The university, obviously, between Block 22 and then what we've done on campus with some things that we'll show you here in a minute. But Block 22 was almost a $20 million redevelopment effort for the first 4 commercial buildings in downtown Pittsburgh. We had $70 million. We had $70 million of investment on campus between the Plaster Center, expansion of the Overman Student Center.
Maybe my friend.
And expansion of the Overman Student Center, and then the Bignell Center for the Performing Arts. We've had significant investment in medical, whether that's at Ascension Via Christi or the Community Health Foundation or Community Health Center of Southeast Kansas, which is a rock star story in and of itself, or the investments that Freeman Hospital has now made with a gorilla leading Freeman Hospital have made in her hometown. Obviously, other education in the K-12 space, the housing side of things, which I'll detail here in a few moments, but we're talking seismic shift in these areas over the last not quite a decade. And these are all, investment, capital follows capital, but people also follow investment. And one way to tell the health of a community is the amount of capital investment that's happening in that given place. So the other thing, and we don't have to touch on any more detail, but the tourism kind of was brought up there for a moment, but we've had significant tourism impact. Our transient guest tax over the last, which is collected on hotels, this year, we can't really talk about as much because obviously people aren't coming here to stay as much. What they aren't doing is leaving as much either. And there's now enough places for them to be able to spend their money here locally in ways that they don't need to go to Joplin. Because when you have 6 new restaurants open in a 6-week period in downtown Pittsburgh, and any one of those restaurants is every bit as good, if not way better than any restaurant you can go to in Joplin or within an hour, then you don't need to leave. And with the changing nature of retail, and we had during about a 12 or 18-month period, we had 26 new businesses open in downtown Pittsburgh. A significant portion of those were specialty retail, obviously the restaurants and the coffee shops and those sorts of things. You see here some of the stats on tourism. A big driver on this has been the Plaster Center at Pittsburgh State University. That's an indoor track facility. It's also strength and conditioning, indoor football practice field. But that facility alone is something we work with the CVB very closely on, and the county has helped to invest in. At that facility alone, between May of 18 and May of 19, brought 40,000 people to Pittsburgh that would not otherwise have come to Pittsburgh. And so you think about what economic impact that is. The other thing that has really shifted, and so now I'm going to highlight a few of the specific sort of projects because I think they're really important. So if we want to move on to infrastructure, the two most important things that have occurred in the last decade with regard to infrastructure, one is Highway 69 expansion. we're now down to a rapidly shrinking stretch of road that does not connect all the way to Kansas City. We are still, as of today, and again, that's rapidly shrinking, and that's because of the leadership of a lot of folks that came before us from 40 years ago who've been working on Highway 69. I can tell you, anytime I meet with a federal legislator, transportation, the very first thing they're going to say to me is, yes, we understand you need Highway 69 completed. Ken Brock's already been here. Blake Benson's been here. We used to talk to General Abishon. This is something that is a great example of when you have a vision, when you have a consistent message that you can get things done. But as of today, we still are the only four-year institution in the state of Kansas that's not connected to a four-lane highway. That has been a significant impediment to our growth. It's something, though, that we are getting closer. We're now going to be within just a few miles of that connection, and then we'll continue to advocate for that to go all the way down to puncture that artery of I-44, which is what really needs to happen. Because if we had a four-lane highway from I-44 to Kansas City, I guarantee you they don't need to drive all the way over to 49 Highway in Missouri to be able to get to Kansas City. And you think about the traffic that comes from Texas or Oklahoma or Arizona, et cetera, it could be that next level game change. The other piece of infrastructure, which is something that people don't think about as much, in addition to the city street work and how well that has gone, and we just passed a new sales tax for that here in Pittsburgh that was a little bit reduced combined total. But the other thing has been fiber. So that's something that people don't think a lot about, probably, is what's necessarily under the ground. But we have one of the most robust fiber networks that you could find in the entire state of Kansas, particularly for a city our size. It will rival Google Fiber in Kansas City and any of those kinds of places. And we think about the economy, the post-COVID economy, wherein it's going to be really a lot driven on the notion of you don't have to be at an office in a specific place. Having a robust fiber network is every bit as important as how fast you can get to Kansas City. And so we now have multiple tiered redundant fiber. And that is another great example of where the unleashing free enterprise made a difference. When Darren Hall and Jay Byers got into their positions, there were these pretty restrictive franchise agreements with AT&T and Cox. They said, we're not going to sign these again for 10 years. And they opened the market up to competition. Croccan, which is a local company, came in and started laying hundreds, of miles of fiber, as did Optic Communication in Cherokee. So you had two locals competing with each other and driving that great fiber development. So that's going to be huge for us in the future. It's huge for us now. When we hear communities from across the country, rural communities and smaller communities, who are just very envious of the situation we have on fiber, and that's something Jay Byers really brought to the table. We also have had a reintroduction of the arts in a way into Pittsburgh that had not been for a long time. Some of you on this call might remember Carnegie Hall. I don't, and that's not me bragging about being young, but I don't remember it. I graduated from Pitt State in 2001. Carnegie Hall was torn down in 1980, I believe, and so I do not remember it. What I do know is that my boss, President Scott, his leadership has been so incredible in getting the Bicknell Center done. It was essentially like a promise made, a promise kept. Promise made in 1980. There was a note on the desk that had been passed from president to president since 1978, I guess, or whenever it was torn down, that said, we need a performing arts venue. With the help of one of our great alums, a great entrepreneurial story, obviously, who wants and has continued to give back to this place, Gene Bicknell, and his substantial gift to get that off the ground. We now have a world-class performing arts venue wherein we host we have in the past been hosting two Broadway plays each year. We're hosting the Lee Scott lecture series, which we've hosted former President Clinton, Governor, or now Senator Romney. We've hosted former First Lady Laura Bush, as well as former Secretary Rice, Condoleezza Rice. That has been just an incredible opportunity for us to be able to have these sorts of things. I also want to say, I noticed Bonnie Corsini came on the call earlier. And the truth is this notion of the drumbeat of the importance of the arts is something in downtown development, both, is something that she's been working on through the Colonial Fox Theater Foundation, which actually was one of my first forays into community involvement when I came back in 2007, 2008. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the work that she's done and how that's actually helped to promote this culture of the importance of the arts in Pittsburgh. But also, sports are important. We know sports are important. We know tourism is important. The Robert W. Plaster Center Again, this is something that would not have happened without the generosity, this time not of a donor, but if it was of a foundation based in Southwest Missouri that their principles were focused on the notions of the importance and the role of free enterprise and how a tourism attraction matters for communities. They invested, but even bigger than that, this was the first project that Darren Hall and I and Jay Byers got a chance to work on together. When people ask about the seeds of Block 22, I say in some way they started to be cultivated with the Placer Center, which that was opened in 2014. After about we approached that like we were going to do a campaign to sell the community, and we didn't end up doing it that way. But what we did end up getting was we got a 5-0 vote on investing $5 million in this facility, and you can barely get 5-0 votes on the minutes anymore in bodies, elected bodies. But we had a 5-0 vote on a $5 million investment for a town of our size, and this would have been they made that vote it would have been 2012 probably, which is a really gutsy and courageous move on their part. And without it, we wouldn't have this facility that has helped to drive transient guest tax and sales tax, as well as our national prominence and recognition. It is one of the best indoor track facilities in the country, certainly among the top 2 or 3 within Division II. We've now hosted, I think, 4 national championships. It's just a real jewel that I hope that many of you are able to come back to. Block 22, I've touched on slightly already. This is a picture from that a friend of mine, actually Matt Burton, who it's really small, you can't see there, but Matt Burton, who Joe mentioned, he and I have now worked together closely for 5 years on this project. We're actually just about, for Block 22, next Friday will be the launch of the Pittsco Idea Shop. It's the last piece of Block 22 to be launched. Block 22 is a really innovative approach to housing for students, as well as the way universities can engage to help advance their communities in new and relevant ways. And so we have 100 students in downtown Pittsburgh now, living in the upper floors of buildings that you all might remember as either the Commerce or the Professional building, depending upon your era, the Opera House Hotel, the Baxter building, which some people don't even realize is a separate building. You would know Commerce and Baxter as Kroll's, because that's what most would remember, because it was for multiple generations, the Kroll family pharmacy and Hallmark Gifts. And then the National Bank building, which is actually where my office is now, was previously an opera house. This is a picture right now of the Pittsco Idea Shop. This is the portion that we call the garage. Fittingly, it has glass garage doors, and it is the place where most of the dirtier, louder equipment is. We also have a digital studio adjacent to that space, which is also right here where you see the place for ideas. This is the digital studio where you can do 3D printing and large format printing, laser engraving. We'll have some robotics elements in there. Like I said, we're really excited to get this launched. Obviously, it's not going to be launched right now in the full way that we're going to imagine eventually it will be, just because of the restrictions we have on the numbers and those sorts of things. We also have added within Block 22, we have three restaurants and a coffee shop. This is a picture of Toast, which is a great local culinary gem. It's actually was started by Heather Horton, who some of you might have heard of or have had the delicious work that she's done at Sweet Designs Cakery. She and her husband, Roger, both Pitt State grads, they committed and put the flag in downtown Pittsburgh, maybe second only to Vonnie Corsini. And I will say that seeing that vision play out, it was wonderful then to say, when Heather said that they were interested in looking at doing their next foray into a restaurant, we were very excited to welcome them into that space. And so it's a really great concept. Again, all of these places, my biggest concern is just helping them. We want to make sure that we help them through this time of COVID, because obviously this is a challenging time, particularly for restaurant and hospitality. That's the industry that's gotten hit the hardest. We also have brick and mortar and Juicy's, which is connected. Juicy's is a burrito concept. Brick and mortar is a place that when you're sitting in there, I think that you would feel as if you could be standing on a corner in Kansas City or possibly even Chicago or New York. It's a great vibe, incredible craft food, craft cocktails. It's the kind of place that you now don't have to worry about where would I take somebody if I need to go out on a date. You can do that now in Pittsburgh, Kansas, in a way that you couldn't before, which has been a great addition to the community. And then Root Coffee House, which occupies what was the old opera house hotel lobby. And we were able to preserve a lot of the old features of that, which was a great space. It almost, they were an existing coffee house. We knew we needed a coffee house because the first incubators and maker spaces were coffee houses and pubs. And we did not want to bring in a corporate coffee house or some big coffee house that would put someone like Root out of business, who had started several years prior to that down the street. And so we brought them in, more than tripled their space. And it's just been incredible to have them as part of this. We've had a lot of other expansions. I mentioned we had 20 some businesses open in downtown Pittsburgh over an 18-month period. That included retail outlets such as Audacious Boutique, and on the men's side is the first menswear store to open, I don't know since when, in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and that's called Miners in Monroe, just down the street from us. We also have more than one coffee shop in downtown Pittsburgh, which is incredible. Signet was the first, and these folks who aren't graduates of Pittsburgh State, but their son was a graduate of Pittsburgh State University, and they had always wanted to have a coffee roastery. They started the coffee roastery that then started selling some cups of coffee, and now they roast and they do have a full-scale coffee shop now there. And they've now moved from their first location and now have renovated and transformed another old building in Pittsburgh, in downtown Pittsburgh. These folks, we don't now only have one microbrewery. We went from 0 microbreweries in Pittsburgh, which it's interesting that in the conversations about what makes a thriving community, I'm not joking. If you look at the list of things, whether or not the community has a microbrewery or a microdistillery actually is an indication of the health of the quality of life and the economy. We now have 2. These folks that Drop the H, of course, a play on the difference between us and Pennsylvania, I guess. They actually brought in, they trained in making beer, but also in making New York style pizza and brick oven pizza. And then Jolly Fox Brewery, which is another local, this is actually a local guy. And he, Joel Stewart, has done an exceptional job. And it's just, they're like almost, I guess they are across the street from each other. So they're almost right across the street from each other. You can walk from one to the other pretty easily. So it's pretty incredible to have those 2. We've also, in addition to the downtown businesses, we've had expansions of some of the long-lasting, foundational businesses in Pittsburgh, whether that's Jake's Fireworks or Watco or CDL, Miller's. The old McNally building is now occupied by CDL and Watco, I think, combined. Like, you think about how empty that was for so long, and it's been now overtaken with the expansions of businesses that were homegrown and are actually symbiotic with each other. Miller's has had one expansion after another, and they've also really helped the Finishing Touch, which is in downtown Pittsburgh, and these great stories of businesses that are helping each other. We also, maybe since some of you have been back, we had a significant investment of a casino, Kansas Crossing Casino, as well as a Hampton Inn hotel, which has increased the lodging quality, along with the La Quinta, which is on the southern end of town, but the La Quinta there. And those 2 things have obviously had significant draws and impact on the tourism side of things in particular. And then from a housing standpoint, I mentioned a few moments ago that Quentin Holmes was on the call, and he's the city's housing director and has done exceptional work. And I think this might shock some folks to realize that there are currently being constructed, planned, or in progress 350 new homes in Pittsburgh, Kansas. And one of the things that I will say early on, and that's with more than 6 developments that are going on. One of which is Silverback Landing on the south side of town, which it's interesting. You think about that started because the university and the city came together and realized we had some land, they had some land, we almost had the wrong land, and we came up with a way to exchange that land. It doesn't sound that complicated, but it is very complicated, and it was something that actually helped to set the stage for there to be sufficient land for the city to build. It was prime residential building land, and that's underway. We actually have will soon be turning dirt, or I believe on a 55 and over higher end community here in Pittsburgh. And, it kind of runs the gamut of the types of housing. And I will say early on, when Joe talked about when he first got involved in Imagine Pittsburgh 2030, one of the things that we all recognized pretty early on was that, so the lack of a 4-lane highway was probably the number 1 challenge. Number 2 was lack of adequate housing. And so you had so many people who were coming here and either said, okay, And number 3 is childcare, another one that we're going to continue to work on. But you have so many people here that would come in and say, okay, I would love to live here, but there's not a house that's adequate for what I need or that sort of thing. And so they end up living in Carl Junction or in Webb City or one of those sorts of places. And a lot of people say, oh, it's because of the taxes. And it's like, I don't believe that. I really don't. I never have, because I know that there's some value in not having to drive 40 minutes each way every day. And it probably is worth it, whatever the tax difference is. I think it's more likely, and what we found from the housing survey that was done was that actually that wasn't the primary reason. That wasn't the primary driver. It was because there wasn't enough housing. And so the fact that under the leadership of Darren and Jay at the city, and now Quentin being involved in that, to lead to the fact that, you know, the hope and the expectation is that 10 years from now we have at least 350 more houses than we do now. And as people change from the house that they're in, they're going to have to improve the house that they're in in order to sell that house. And so you also have internal existing home redevelopment going on that is phenomenal. I mentioned Via Christi's expansion, as well as Community Health Center Southeast Kansas. Community Health Center Southeast Kansas really is a jewel, and it's doing incredible work. The work that the hospital at Via Christi is doing. And then I mentioned, you know, and with Freeman and the investment that Freeman have made here. And then finally, and I'll let Joe chat about this as he transitions into some of the more cultural and other important transitions. And that's the Lord's Diner. And that's something that we kind of started with talking about Imagine Pittsburgh 2030 and Rotary, which were things that Joe and I got to work on together. One of the things that I'm most proud of getting to work with Joe on was the Lord's Diner. And the Lord's Diner had a very simple commitment, which was that no one in our community should ever not have access to at least one hot meal every day. And part of it for, I think, Joe and I both, was to say that when we think about how you grow a community, how you grow economic development, you can't just think about the top. You can't just think in those terms. You have to think about, how do we ensure that we care for the whole gamut? Because the truth is there's so many people on the bottom end of that gamut who could make their way up. They just need some rungs, and they don't have them yet. And there are people that if you have such food insecurity that you don't know how your kids are going to eat, it's really hard for you to think about finishing your GED or how to get another job. And so Joe and I think we're very committed to that, both from a faith standpoint, but also from the standpoint of what it meant for our community. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is what we've done with the Lord's Diner. Joe, you want to talk any more about that?
Yeah. I was in a meeting with Darren Hall, our city manager. His name's come up a lot. Darren, amazing guy. And his father was in the mental health business in Topeka. And so Darren grew up, his dad talking and helping people, and people coming to his door at night, and he saw all this. And I don't think what people appreciate is that when this dreaming and visioning for the future of Pittsburgh's going on, Darren and the Lord's Diner was on the table. He's one of the first that is always talking about the entire community. And he's, whether it was the diner and the least among us, or whether it's how to, looking at the business community saying, how do we get these minimum wages up? How do we get this to be a place that everybody in this community can thrive? And so the diner's just been an amazing movement. They talk about the university setting, how a research park is a collision between students and faculty and industry. I think the Lord's Diner for us, it's right there on 4th and Locust, the block off of middle of our town, but it is a collision between people that are either homeless or on the working poor, and volunteers. Over 850 volunteers in this community that work once a month to treat guests with dignity and respect, give them a meal. But it's not about the meal. It's just in the evening, somebody sharing and making somebody feel good, even if it's only for 5 minutes and a meal. So it's a great project that the whole community rallied around, and I think it's you got to look at the whole community. I wanted to talk a second about we can look. It's amazing, isn't it, to see all these facilities and all these projects. But I wanted to talk a bit about what I think one of the biggest things is the intangible change, and that was a cultural mindset in our community. And we've gone from, it would be kind of nice to have that, to a place that those kind of dreams can be voiced and worked with, and dreaming begets dreaming. And kind of like Matt said, maybe this is our time, which has certainly spurred some of that on. Economic prosperity has made some of those things happen that you can dream, but if you don't have the funding, it ain't going to happen. So a mindset has happened. We've always been tough. We've always been gritty, but I think there's a level of dreaming and then the ability to get it done. I think you got to ask, well, why? How can we go from a strong foundation, but now this in this position? And I tell you, I look at leaders across our community, and I think the first one to start, since this is a Pittsburg State crowd, is a key player, pivotal player in this, is Dr. Scott. His willingness to invest in the community, his not only himself, but Shawn and his area, and to forge, encouraging and giving him the space to forge relationships with the city, the chamber, and our business has been amazing. So Shawn does an amazing job, and it's fun. It's just fun to watch him work. So Dr. Scott's leadership and his vision is something that's pretty uncanny. Through Leadership Kansas, I spent some time with Blake Flanders, who's the president of the Board of Regents. And he said to me last year, we were through that program, so we'd meet every month for about 6 months. He said, Joe, you do understand how good Dr. Scott is, don't you? And I'm like, yeah, we understand. He's great, isn't he? And he's like, no, you need to understand he's exceptional. I mean, he's, I don't know if he would say publicly that he's the best he has, but he went right up and bumped up against it as much as he could. So I feel very grateful, and I think all of you probably, I hope, share that. He is exceptional. But there's also some other pivotal players. When I look at all those projects, they sure look nice when you see the final picture. But what you don't see is the friction and the tension that each of those projects carried with them. And it's real, and it's challenging. And I would say I'm a volunteer. I give, I have a business that I have to run and other projects. But so the city project, I'm a support guy. But the guys that do it for a living every day and are getting beat up, whether it's the Shawns and the Quintons and the Jay Byers that supports Darren and Blake Benson's, I just have so much respect and admiration for, because they had to see something before it was built and put it out there. And with change comes, in any of your communities, I'm sure you're fighting this or deal with this, that change, there's going to be somebody that's going to have a sense of loss. And I think at times we probably haven't handled that as well as we could, in terms of maybe anticipating what that might look like and how we can maybe deal with it. But I think we're getting better at it with each project. Not all change is good, and you have to go through that vetting process. So anyway, tough guys, tough people, and I've admired everybody that's touched this project. I think leadership's been amazing, collaboration, but at the same time, it's not always easy, and it's hard and it's frustrating. And but they do see the vision that's bigger, and I know once they get through it, they're professionals, and they're all the outside influence they may get, it's worth it to them. And so just from an alum and somebody, I think as an alumni all over the country, my thought when John brought this topic up was I hope there's a place in your heart for Pittsburgh, but more importantly, I hope you appreciate or understand that university that's a part of you and you're a part of has advanced from when you were here and has had a vision and has really become critical to the lives of people in Pittsburgh. And is this all Pitt State? No. Is it all the city government? No. Or the chamber? No. Or business? No. It's really a collaboration that required a lot of people to check their egos at the door and go out and work. And we have to remind each other of that sometimes because we all have egos. And that I think Vonnie, who I admire so much, and I'm on her board, is an example of somebody who's worked on a project and worked and put years in and has a big vision. And timing, it hasn't gotten completed yet, right, Vonnie? But lined up, staying there, showing up, and those are the kind of projects I think we're going to get to, and it's going to fit. It's all going to fit together in a master plan that we don't really know how it's going to end, but I can tell you it's on a road to being even better than it is today.
Yeah, and this is not to be too Pollyannish about any of this. I mean, as Joe indicated, it's sometimes it's hard scrabble. I will tell you, after 10 years of a very sort of punctuated hard scrabble, I've shared with Joe, I'm kind of ready to say, okay, can I not be the wartime general for a little bit? Can I just sort of back off and be the diplomat? Because it isn't all roses. And as I said earlier about the notion that nothing is for sure, nothing is given, and the fact that we got here because of 3 votes in 1 year means that at any given time those things can shift. And so we have a responsibility to be telling the story. We have a responsibility to be telling, that's what we're hoping tonight, is to tell the story not only to our alums but to our community, to those that this is something worth preserving and advancing. And I'll do a little pitch quickly here for a podcast that we do for Block 22 called Around the Block. So if you listen to the podcast, it's on Spotify and Apple and everything, but it's something that one of my good friends and colleagues, Brett Dalton, and I, because we're trying to tell the story of Pittsburg and Southeast Kansas, but really it's telling the story of places all over the country like this. And there's not anybody else really telling the story of places like this. There's a lot of people that have been left behind, a lot of communities have been left behind, and no one really is too concerned about any of them. And we want to tell the story because we think it's worth telling. And so we do know we still have challenges. We still have a significant child care challenge that we're going to continue to address. It's one of the priorities for Imagine Pittsburgh 2030. Healthcare and public wellness more broadly. This is something that Joe's been very passionate about, and we're working on through Imagine Pittsburgh 2030. We're going to continue to need to work on housing developments across the board, the economy, roads, schools. The challenges will continue. It's not as if it's going to be over. And of course, we're also in the midst of facing a global pandemic of the scale that no one has had to deal with for 100 years. And so, but as Joe would say a lot of times, is that we're battle tested now. I mean, I think that's in some ways what he was getting to, and we remain optimistic even during what seems like cloudy times. We are optimistic that we can come out the other side even better, and we're excited for the future.
I think in the essence of time, Shawn, maybe to move on to questions, and we talk about the future, and we're continuing to dream and finish in the highway, and we know the YMCA needs to look at, and we have a Colonial Fox project downtown that's not done and that we need to move, and Quentin's got a ton of work with housing. So we're aware of all of those issues. We're not done, and we feel really good about them. But I think to Shawn's point, we have leaders in so many areas that we're really going boldly into the future, and we're really excited about it. And I think I think with having a plan and then executing the plan and getting people engaged is amazing. Shawn talked about 3 votes. I think the other thing we've learned is that those other 2 votes are really the people that are maybe making us slow down and making sure we take everybody with us. So there's just so many positives, even in the light of those kinds of the situations. So I think just to wrap my piece of it, Shawn, I think it would be maybe just moving into what our hope is with Come Home.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let me talk. Okay. Do you have anything before I jump into that?
No, I think you got it.
So we've been in several meetings, and this thing's just kind of come to us. And it was at the beginning of this conversation, it's just uncanny how many people love Pittsburgh for whatever reason, all the reasons. And so one thing that I found was, does that mean, and 80% of the people on this call this impacts, does that mean because somebody went through Pitt State and went out to change the world like all of you have, and the impact you've made over the entire country, that is amazingly powerful. And so what we realized is, yeah, are we going to get 5% of graduates, 10 people who grew up here to stay here? I don't know where they're supposed to be. We don't know where it'll end up. But we know we would be remiss if we didn't continually invite people to come home. And that's what this whole come home notion is. Coming home, you don't have to physically come home to keep that spirit in your heart and to help this community. And so come home, could be come home to visit, come home to live, which we're seeing a lot more happening as people in their careers that, hey, it's not a bad place to be, or come home to invest. And that being, we have so many successful people out there that have touches with organizations, their own or companies they work for, that, if they could find ways to invest in this community, it would be a great benefit, and it would help us continue our growth plans. So I would just send that out, come home, and you'll be hearing more about that as we kind of work through how we make that happen.
Well, and I'd said, I think that this is a great example. And I think this is tonight, you guys came home and you were willing to, in Joe and my, at least tradition, you think about time, investments of time, talent, and treasure. Tonight, you invested an hour, maybe a little bit more, depending on when you got on the call with us. And that's an investment that we take very seriously because that's an investment of you showing how much you still care about this place. And we hope that now you leave the time that we've had together, that John and his team have been so innovative and figure out ways to do this, that you guys can leave the time that we've spent together and you can be excited about your hometown, about the place where you graduated from college, that you can tell others that you can come home physically at some point, that if you have opportunities to move home, that you would consider moving home because there will be a place for you to live and there'll be a place for you to thrive and enjoy, and that you'll tell people of college age that this would be a great place for them to go, and whatever age they're at, that they could stay and live and raise a family. And so we want to thank you guys for the investment and time that you gave to us tonight. And I know John has a few things to say, but so just thank you very much for all that you do.
Yep.
Are there any questions? We've got two individuals here who've been very, very involved in so many things over the last 10 plus years. I think if you want to, you could unmute your mic and ask a question if you would like to.
Well, it's Jerry Haydenberg. I graduated in 1965, BS in education. I was very active in the Wesley student movement. There's a building almost the corner of Broadway and some other building that went by the old Hughes Hall. Is that still there, the Wesleyan Student Movement building?
Jerry, you had submitted that question and we did a little bit of research on it for you.
All right, appreciate it.
Absolutely, and I don't know if it's the answer you want. So Steve Cox is our university archivist, and he went through and looked through some things, and he said that, so I assume that is this related to Wesley House with the Presbyterian Church? Methodist, sorry, with the Methodist Church?
Methodist, yeah.
Okay.
Methodist only, not
Okay.
associated with anybody else. Wesley Methodist Student Movement.
Mm-hmm.
So, he could see that there was a strong organization into the 1960s. He said that their building was at 201 East Williams. Does that sound familiar?
Good. Yeah, that sounds
Okay,
right.
201 East Williams. And I'm trying to think, can you recall, Shawn, is there still off of Williams Street there, kind of northeast of the admission office? It seems like
there's a thing that was called wasn't that where CrossQuest?
Yeah.
Which was like when I was in college, at least, that was like a non-denominational, I think, sort of college-focused ministry. I don't remember anything with regard to the Wesley side of things.
Okay.
So unfortunately, Jerry, we didn't come up with a lot of information about whether any of these facilities are still here. I think I think they probably are, but maybe they're being used in a different capacity now.
Different capacity. Yeah, well, that's a good answer. I appreciate
Shawn,
that.
Dad wants to answer.
Oh, yes, great.
Oh, sure. Yeah, good. I'm glad we got him on here.
The building there on the corner of Williams and I'm not sure which, it's a gray brick building. It was built in probably the mid 70s and was it's still owned by the United Methodist Church, but
Is that right?
inactive at this time.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you, Bert.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, appreciate
I
that.
appreciate, while I have your attention, I appreciate the information. I'm proud of all of the work that you have been doing, and you make me feel like I wish I were 30 years younger than I am. That includes you too, Joe.
I should probably point out that that the effusive praise is coming from a guy who's basically like a second dad to me growing up. So that means a lot.
Nice.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Well, I hate to dominate things, but I came about a year ago, to the reunion of the student government alumni.
Oh, great, Jerry. Of course, of course. Well, we would have met then.
Yes, I was so impressed with that Block 22 Performing Arts Center, the new athletic facility. I mean, Pittsburg State has just done a tremendous job of building for creative and potentially attractive work. I just can't say enough about the administration, starting with President Scott and all the way down.
Thank you.
Thank you,
That's
Jerry.
very kind
That's
of you.
always, we can't hear that enough. And, the best thing about my job is when we have people back to campus for reunions and things like that, that's what we hear. And so, we would, if you haven't been back to campus in a while, particularly if you haven't been back to campus or Block 22 or our community, since many of these projects have finished, well, I was getting ready to say you should come soon, but maybe you should wait a few more months. I'm starting to feel like things are a little bit more normal because I'm surrounding myself with alumni, but I forget that we're still in the middle of a pandemic. But when it's safe, we certainly would love to have you back on campus or back in the community. And that's not to say that things are, locked down and closed down. I mean, I think our community has done a really tremendous job of keeping COVID in check, our schools and here at the university. Here we are, and I think about week 10 or 11 of a 16-week semester, and hey, we're still open. Many of the classes are online, but many of them are in person, and we've managed to keep the doors open. We've kept the doors open of our public schools, and so some folks are doing a really excellent job. So the doors aren't closed, and we would always love to see you on campus, but things always look a little bit prettier in the spring as well. So that's an open invitation. Certainly in the near future, probably not this spring, but certainly in the fall, our office hopes to have more reunions and more in-person events and have things get a little bit more back to normal than they have been the past few months. But in the meantime, as I said, we are excited to have an opportunity to do events like this, where we are able to engage people from all over the country. We typically wouldn't have an opportunity to go up to the Omaha area. We don't make it down to Texas as often as we would like to. And so we appreciate an opportunity to talk to you about these sorts of things. I see that another comment just came through on the chat. I just want to double check and make sure it's not a question. Okay, so it's some comments. We appreciate the comments.
It's a lovely comment.
Thank you, Dolores. Any other questions for Shawn and Joe?
I just had a comment, John.
Yes, there you go.
I was just thinking about the culture of camaraderie and the momentum that Pittsburgh has. And one time was very evident to me when we had the Q&A in the Colonial Fox Theater right before the ribbon cutting of Block 22. I mean, you could just walk in and see the potential of restoring Colonial Theater after what had just been restored. And that's the neat thing about what's happening in the Pittsburgh culture to me, is the support and the excitement of restoring things like that, moving forward as a team. That's great.
And you know, the disheartening thing is that everything was going so strongly and then COVID hit. However, I will say that, you know, as Shawn and Joe mentioned, all these new businesses and all these new restaurants, I think they all still have their doors open, and they're staying afloat, and they're keeping their chins up. And, you know, that says a lot about the folks in this community who are doing takeout and ordering things online, who are supporting these businesses. And so, you know, hopefully we've made it through the toughest time. I know that there are still tough roads ahead, but you're absolutely right, Mary Jo. I mean, people coming together in this community, it's just been absolutely tremendous.
Hey, John, let me jump in on something that wasn't mentioned. And Katie, it's nice to see you. You popped up on the screen. But I see Katie and Shawn and John, and I can't see some of you others, but you know, most of us have been doing things for some years. But one of the things that is really exciting is to go out into the community, go to the restaurants, and to see the number of young people. You know, my mom just passed, but she quite, you know, 96 years old, and we talked a lot about Pitt State and the years, and she used to talk about those periods where there were just so many young families in Pittsburgh, and you know, so much. And we've kind of gone through a rebirth of that. And when we talk about leadership, Quentin is an example. I'm sorry, Quentin, not seeing your picture, but these guys and gals are young, and they're vibrant, and they have ideas, and they're not afraid. And that has definitely been another thing that's happened. I don't think, Shawn, you and I talked about, even when we brainstormed what kind of things that have made this possible, but youth is a wonderful thing. And you know, and they've let, I think there's a pretty good up and down the lineup. We have the folks that have seen a lot, done a lot, all the way to the rookies, but everybody seems to find a place to be able to play, and I think that's a real positive.
No, absolutely, Joe. So, you know, some homework assignments, okay? Educational institutions. So some homework assignments as we depart this evening. We have recorded this session tonight, and so we'll put a link out once we have edited a little bit off the beginning and the end. So certainly I would ask you to, and we'll send this in an email, a follow-up email to all of you, share this with your friends. Share this with fellow Gorellas who maybe weren't able to be on the call tonight. If you live in a community with other Gorellas, help us share this. Help us get the word out about the exciting things that are going on in Pittsburgh. And, you know, we do a great job, I think, of promoting what we're doing here in Southeast Kansas, and particularly Pittsburgh and at the university, but we can't hit everyone. And so we ask for your help on that front. We ask you to come back and visit when you feel that it's safe for you. We love having you in our community. We love having you on campus. And Shawn alluded to this as well. And I always have my admission hat on because I worked in the admission office for 8 years, but our best recruiters are our alumni. And so whether you're telling the kid next door or your child or grandchild or niece or nephew about the great experiences that you had here at Pitt State, we appreciate that. And that can help us make inroads. Certainly feel free to give me a call, and I'll connect you with the right people in the Office of Admission. We would love to have those young people on campus. And we feel pretty confident that if we're able to get them on campus, and that still is continuing even through COVID, we are having in-person visits. We're pretty confident that when we get them here and we are able to get them in front of some of our amazing faculty and staff, that usually they leave thinking, hey, this could be a really great fit for me. So please consider that as well. And Shawn and Joe will follow up to grade those assignments in the days to come. So keep us up to date on what you're doing.
Joe's
Thank
a tough
you.
grader.
Thanks, John.
Yes, Shawn's a tough grader.
I said
hey,
Joe
so we've got
is.
some stuff to give away. We've got some stuff to give away. And I know you're not here in person, so guess what? We're going to drop it in the mail. Okay. So this is really small type. I've got to put on my magnifiers here. Yeesh. Okay.
So much for being young, John. Earlier, Joe put you in that category.
Well, can't be as young as you. All right. So Belinda Andrews Brumfeld is on the call. And Belinda, we've got this Pitt State calendar we've put together. I've been lifting weights a lot, so it's got some great pictures in it. So we'll send this to you in the mail. Actually, it's of places on campus. We think you'll enjoy it. So Belinda, that is going to go to you. Kevin Kofer down there in Texas. We've got a Pitt State umbrella that we're going to drop in the mail to you, sir. Appreciate your support, Kevin. I got to see Kevin when I was down in Texas in February, right before the pandemic hit. We had one last tour. So that will come in the mail to you, sir. Jerry in Nebraska. We've got a Alumni and Constituent Relations bag for you that we'll drop in the mail. Okay. Lillian Saldana, we've got a Pitt State mug for you. Lillian, good to see you. We miss you here in Pittsburgh. Lillian worked on campus for years and was a great colleague. Okay. David Steffen, we've got a Pitt State cutting board for you. So we'll get that in the mail. Not too many of those out there, one of a kind item. Dave Thomas, we've got a Pitt State alum license plate holder in the mail for you. Dolores, we've got some Pitt State coasters that we'll drop in the mail for you. And
I pick those up.
Oh,
Just a
that's
couple blocks
true. You
away.
can stop by and pick them up. Absolutely. You'll get them more quickly that way. And Deanna, we've got a Pitt State Once a Gorilla, Always a Gorilla coaster and some Pitt State sunglasses for you. We can drop them in the mail or you can drop by. You just let us know what's easy. So, let's see. I've got one more thing to give away here. And it's going to John Robb. John, we've got a Pitt State cup for you and Carol. So we'll get that in the mail as well, but you're in town too. So if you need to get out and about, let us know and we'll have it here for you. So thanks again, everyone, for being part of the call tonight. Like I said, we're trying to get as close to normal as we can and having the camaraderie of lots of gorillas on a call certainly is good for us. And we hope that it's been a good and informative call for you as well. We are so incredibly lucky to have such loyal alumni and to have such wonderful, talented individuals who are helping us promote this university and helping us really promote and improve our community. So a huge thanks to Joe and Shawn for all that they do and for their leadership and for taking time out of their evening to share lots of this great information with us.
Sure.
All right. Well,
Thank you all
everyone,
very much.
as we're starting to go into the holiday season, I saw my first holiday advertisement last night. So, it's right around the corner.
Katie's excited.
So anyway, we wish you, whatever you celebrate, we wish you happy holidays. We wish you safe travels. And please stay in touch. If there's anything at all that our office can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out. We will send a follow-up email in the next couple days with a link to this recording. Please share that, and we'll share some other information about other things that the Alumni Association has available for you as well. So once again, thanks for your time, friends, and once a gorilla, always a gorilla. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thanks for the update.
Thank
Thank
you.
you guys for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks.